Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. So, we were discussing about the international trade, and we have already given you I think all of you have the sufficient idea about what do you mean by international trade and how we can bring dimension to the international trade in the macroeconomics. So, I think we have already covered that part. Let us move what we were discussing in the last session. So, the reference for this particular session will remain same, the Stephen D. Williamson, and I am referring to chapter 16 of this book. So, if you want, you can also refer, and the objective will remain same. Now, we will be moving to now we are understanding in the last session we ended up here when we were trying to set up the 2-period SOE model with a small economy or small open economy model, and then we will be moving to the credit market imperfections and then how it impacts the debt market, right. So, this was here we were talking about the 2-period scenario, as I already mentioned that here you have a 2 periods, here a small open economy. The most crucial thing that you have to keep in mind that we are talking about current account surplus, which consists of the it consists of savings, but no investment. So, here we talk about that. So, we were talking about the current account surplus. So, this is how we derived, and this is the new thing that we should be talking about. So, we derive these two from the consumer and the government, and here since we are dealing with the lump sum tax. So, here the easy transfer. So, there you have a G is equal to T. Because of that, we have been able to derive here C plus G is equal to C transpose plus G transpose upon 1 plus R is equal to Y plus Y transpose upon 1 plus R. Here we talk about the national present value of the consumption plus government spending must equal the present value of the national income. So, this is what we try and achieve. Now, if you think about the nation's budget constraint. So, how it has come with the open economy setup. So, as I mentioned that the current account surplus is nothing but the savings, and once you have a saving, if you are going to keep in or going to lend to somebody, then you will be offered rate of interest, which means that this will not be counted in present value term, this will be counted in the future value term. So, this is what we are adding here. C transpose plus G transpose is equal to 1 plus R C A plus Y transpose. In this setup, we can think of representative consumers making choices over consumption bundle. So, here we have a C plus G and C transpose plus G transpose. So, future consumption of the representative consumer, consumption of the government you can think about. So, government expenditure, and then here we talk about C plus G implies that here we are talking about the consumption of the representative consumers and the government expenditure. So, both if you want, you can also substitute these two as in the private consumption and the government consumption, since it involves some kind of expenditure. So, this is what we are trying to understand here. The D 2-period small economy model. So, if you think about the budget constraint, so here this is how it looks like. As I mentioned, we will have two important axes. So, here you have C plus G, C transpose plus G transpose. Here you have a Y into 1 plus R plus Y transpose, and here you have a Y plus Y transpose upon 1 plus R. So, D seems to be the most obvious choice. B, if you are focusing B, which means that you are having no C plus G, but if you are at point A, you are missing C transpose plus G transpose. So, D seems to be the suitable point, and at this point you have indifference curve tangent. So, this is very basic, I would say, understanding about the 2-period small economy equilibrium. We will be further working out with comparative statics, and then it will be easier to understand. Now, there are, once I talk about the current account surplus, then here you have to keep in mind certain things, that's current account surplus increases with current income, which means that if you think that your current income is increasing. So, this is coming from the consumer behavior that we mentioned about the consumption that we discussed. In consumption, we had already discussed that if you have the current income increasing, it means that individuals would like to save. So, in the context of the open economy at the country level, what does it imply? It implies that the country will be saving, because the country expect that the income is increasing in the current period. So, maybe some amount of good exports or good production, something has happened, and because of that the country is expecting that this particular country will have higher income. Now, higher income will also lead to smoothing of consumption, right. So, in the same way, if the current income is increasing, so we were seeing the parallel shift in the budget line. In case of consumer, here also it will be the same, there will be parallel shift of the budget line, because if individual is thinking that the current income is increasing, you will be saving some part of your income, right, for the future consumption. So, this is what it implies here also at the country level, that country saves the money and lends it abroad. So, here what it means, that if your saving is going up, you are lending in the market, you have the CA into 1 plus R in the future period, right. So, overall your current account surplus, your saving is further going to go up, and this is coming from here, that 1 plus R CA is going to add up. So, in future period you are expected to get more. So, this is how it implies here. CA surplus decreases with future income. So, if you have a future income increasing, so suppose you are in campus doing BTech or BS, or suppose you are pursuing some course, in your third semester companies comes and companies come and they give you the job offer. If you know that you are being placed in the company and you have the job offer, then you are very sure that in future you are going to get higher income, because once you join the company, then company will be paying you the salary. What do? You normally ask from your friends, colleagues, and then you have a good party, you invite everyone for dinner, go out. So, if you have that kind of phenomena appearing, then that is what it implies here, that if you have a future income increasing, then you go for less saving, right, because in future your income earnings are going to be better. So, you will be taking risk in the current period, you will be going for more of a borrowing, and if you borrow money, then here you have a dis saving happening. So, this dis saving will lead to what we have, the current account surplus coming down. This will be at the country level, not at the individual level. So, if the country is thinking that they are, or if the country is having scenario in which it feels that this particular country is going to have better income in future, it will also react in the same way that you have for the particular individual. So, the individual or representative consumers behavior can be replicated here at the country level, and then we can think about in the current account surplus. Then here we have the Ricardian equivalence. So, once I have the Ricardian equivalence, which means that taxes do not matter, which means that even if the government is charging a tax, individuals are also smart, they also learn. So, they will be saving that amount. So, if the government is going for a tax cut in this period, it does not mean that it is going to continue even in the future period also. In future period, when it goes for increasing the tax rate, people also have the learning. So, they will be saving this amount, investing somewhere, and this particular amount will be used to compensate for the tax increase in future. So, here we have the Ricardian equivalence, taxes do not matter. Smoothing of savings makes no difference, right, and CA does not change. So, in this case, until and unless the government goes for saving, which means that even if the government is collecting 100 rupee tax, it is spending only 60 rupees, 40 rupees it is saving, that will lead to CA going up, because then it can be added to some other factors, maybe a saving. So, it can be also 1 plus R CA, it can be also part of. But if there is smooth transaction happening, that whatever government is collecting, it simply invests that in somewhere, then in that case your CA is not going to have any change, and your current account surplus is not going to change much. If you have current account surplus less than 0, right, it implies increase in R So, once you have the increase in R, so whatever happens with the interest rate increase. So, if your interest rate is increasing, so here we have, here what it implies that if you have increase in R, increases CA surplus. So, this is what we have, that CA less than 0 means that rate of interest increase, it is going to lead to what we have, the CA surplus. It means that the countries, if they feel that their saving is going to come down, but rate of interest. So, this is what is going to be, with the help of the representative consumer, we can understand that whenever we have the rate of interest increase, we have seen that if based on the borrower and lending scenario, that whether the consumer is the borrower or the lender, if the rate of interest is going to be higher, this particular representative consumer, if he is borrower, then he is going to face scenario, his substitution effect and income effect may move in the same direction, right. So, based on the magnitude of substitution and income effect, you can react on this, but in this case what typically happens, that if you have the increase in R, then this will lead to have decrease in your consumption. So, current consumption declines. If you have a current consumption declining, so C plus G declines, which means that some amount of money is being left out, and this particular money can be channeled to the CA surplus. So, this is how it means, it mentions here. CA greater than 0, again the same dimension that we can introduce here by lending and borrowing. So, if CA, if you have a current account saving is greater than 0, so which means that if you have a current account surplus greater than 0, it implies that increase in R has ambiguous effect on CA, because it may go up or down depending upon that whether the interest rate is having some kind of increasing effect on C plus G or not. If it is not having increasing effect, then your CA will also not react. I would say that instead of going by these two, it is more important to understand these three, because these three have lot of implications. In these two scenarios where you have the savings lower or higher, in that case it is also leading to what we have here. You can say that it will be also some kind of I would say precautionary savings for the government, because if the government is borrower, then it will always think about there will be heavy decline in C plus G. If the saving is higher, then also the government will think about that whether the rate of interest is higher or not, right. So, in that scenario, the C plus G will matter, that whether it is increasing or decreasing. Now, there is one more topic. So far we have discussed about the implications on current account surplus, which is basically about saving, no investment. Now, we are going to introduce the credit market imperfections. If you remember, we had discussed about the credit market imperfections, and under that we had introduced the concept of limited commitment. We also introduced the concept of collateral. We will be having the similar kind of scenario here. The national indebtedness is one of the important topics to be discussed, because majority of the countries which are having the higher debt, they end up having a default scenario. The default scenario creates a very bad impression for the global markets, because then that country will have very difficult time to convince the investor to borrow money. So, from the lending market side, it becomes really a tight market for the defaulting countries, and if you try and understand from the perspective that what are the underlying regions, it is the size or it is the service of the debt. So, the indebtedness has lot of meaning in the context of the sovereign debt crisis that we have in Europe. So, there also it was very important, and from there the people started exploring the idea that from where it is coming and how we can understand this particular context in a better way. So, use ideas on credit market frictions discussed earlier to address these sovereign debt issues. Limited commitment. Suppose that at the beginning of the current period, so let us start. So, suppose that at the beginning of the current period, the nation's private sector and the government debt to the world is B, right. And here this is what the size of the debt that this particular country is having. B can be positive or negative, whether the country is debtor or I would say creditor. If it is creditor, then it is negative. It is debtor, then it is positive, right, if it is having the debtor. So, if I am Talking about B being negative, it means that it is about the creditor. B being positive, it means that it is about the debtor. So, this is how it looks like, that in the current period the budget constraint will be like this, right. So, here C plus G is equal to Y plus whatever amount that this particular country is going to borrow in future, this will be in the present value context, minus whatever is the debt amount. So, this is how it mentions, right. Now, future period national debt is this. So, this is the amount that this particular country is having, the debt size. So, debt to the world is B, right. So, this is how we have. In future, what will be the value? So, this minus B will be coming here, B transpose, because this particular value is going to be matured. So, this particular value, the debt size will be of this, plus Y transpose, which is the future income. So, apart from the consumption and government expenditure, this is the bond that the individual that the country is going to have, the debt size, and here you have the future income. If you try and incorporate this into the national present value budget constraint, so what we had here, we had Y plus Y transpose upon 1 plus R. Here we are also adding the minus B term here. So, what it becomes? It becomes C plus G plus C transpose plus G transpose upon 1 plus R. Here we have Y minus B plus Y transpose upon 1 plus R. Once I go for the defaulting scenarios, so defaulting scenario, it will be easier to understand if you introduce the concept of limited commitment. If you are introducing the concept of limited commitment, then it means that the nation can default on its debt either in the future period or in the current period. So, limited commitment implies this. In case of the individual, we have introduced the housing or some kind of asset, but in case of country, it becomes difficult to have the collateral. So, limited commitment implies that it is some kind of penalty for the country. If the country is going to default, then it is not going to have the access to the world credit market, it will not be able to borrow. So, if default occurs in the future period, then the nation suffers a penalty. So, this is what is the V amount, which captures the cost the country will suffer being denied access to the credit market. So, limited commitment means that whatever is the amount that the country is having, the borrowed amount, which is less than equal to V, which is the default amount. So, the idea is that the indebtedness of the nation, it should not be so large that default will occur, which is the amount this. So, the size of your debt should not be so large that you should be defaulting on the loan. So, this is one criteria. Another criteria is about the debt servicing. So, this particular equation, as I mentioned, this can also be written in this way, but this I will come to later, that once I have the in your future period income, instead of future period income, what we have is Y minus B plus V upon 1 plus R, right. Now, if you think about the default in the current period, so default in the current period, so B is the most likely scenario, right. Here we have the you are at I2, but the country would like to move at A, because A is on a higher indifference curve, it is giving a better return, but without default scenario is B. B corresponds to what we have derived here, right. From here also we can derive, right. So, this is how we get the value here. In the same way, when I see here Y minus B, so here you have Y minus B multiplied by 1 minus R plus Y transpose, and here you have Y minus B, here you have V upon 1 plus R. So, this is coming from here, it is not just the minus, it is. So, here we have the Y minus B plus V upon 1 plus R, and this is the Y amount. The country would like to enjoy B, but though it wanted to be at A, but it would like to enjoy at point B, because this is having no default scenario. So, this is how it mentions about. Now, debt default is not chosen, in the sense that if the default is not chosen, then if this is the scenario, but if default is not chosen, then it means that the country is at B without default. If it goes for default, then this is the amount that this particular country will have to bear. Now, it is up to the country that whether the country would like to go for default or not. If it goes for default, no borrowing is allowed. Now, here you have to also introduce the concept that how much is the size of the debt. If the size of the debt is larger, then the country would say think about the national interest. If the debt service debt is higher, then the country would have to go for the default. So, A and B scenarios are quite important to look from that angle. Now, this is how it looks like. If the nation does not default, the limited commitment constraint binds. If it defaults, then you have the scenario. So, private plus government consumption in the current and future periods will be like this: C plus G is equal to Y minus B plus the default. So, if I am going to simplify this further, then what it gets is this particular part. Here we have the, if default occurs in the current period, then this is how it looks like, that this particular amount will be subtracted from your future income, right. But if you have the Y minus B plus V upon R, if it is less than Y, then you have the defaulting scenario most likely, that you have to now bear the burden, which means that as long as your bond, which is greater than the defaulting cost that you have 1 plus R, then this will have the chance that you will be defaulting given the credit market imperfections that you have. In the most surprising case, what we found that in the case of Greece, we had the sovereign debt crisis and Greece became part of the Eurozone area in 2000, and since then it has been part of the Eurozone countries. But with Greece, the major difficulty that the country experienced, that it had to go for huge borrowing at the higher cost. So, the Greece sovereign debt was traded at much higher than the Germany's bond, but what it happened that even after joining the Eurozone, it was still not able to cope up, and the major leakages in the tax efficiency and the macro mismanagement had led to what is called the default. So, countries will not go for default unless they see that it is really unbearable on the service part of the debt. So, the rate of coupon attached with the bond, it also matters for the default, and apart from the size that we already mentioned about, the service of debt also matters a lot. In case of Japan, we find a limited risk. Now, what happens if we are having a small open economy with production investment? So, now we are going to move toward the comparative statistics. So, default scenarios are quite I would say intuitive to understand from the perspective of how the countries are going to react, but here in this case we can think about. So, here we have the small open economy with production investment. So, here we are talking about the adaptive capacity. Here if you are going by the national income accounting, so in national income accounting, here we have Y is equal to C plus I plus NX. If country is having no trade relation, then it will depend upon aggregate demand, aggregate supply. If your aggregate demand is higher than the aggregate supply, then you need to import more. If the country is having some kind of trade relations, so let us first deal with the trade relation, that if the country is having trade relation, then how does it look like? If the country is having trade relation, then if the demand is less than supply, then whatever is the surplus output, it can be exported and the savings can be made in the form of current account. But if the demand is higher than supply, then in that case your next export will be negative. So, absorptive capacity matters for the economy when they go about balance of trade, that how much you are producing and how much you actually absorb by demand. So, if you are absorbing more than what you produce, it means that you have to import. If you are absorbing less than what you are producing, it means that you have excess capacity to export. So, that is what it generates, and this is how we try to understand here also, that this is the world rate of interest and this is I1. So, here we have at this R1, at this R, here we have Y1, but if you are going for autarkic situation, no trade with any country, then you are going to have a lower output, because in the market, if your R star is greater than RC, then of course you are not going to get that much I would say income, even if you are having whatever you produce. If you have RC greater than R, then only you will be able to attract. So, that in some way it is linked with the what we call it as the Mundell-Fleming model, but to the extent if you want to understand that how it looks like, this is the output supply curve that we have discussed already, that at which labor market clears. This is the aggregate demand. So, these are the lines that we mentioned. But overall the idea is that if you want to improve upon the current account surplus, you need to improve your net exports, then only it matters. Now, here we have an increase in the world interest rate. So, once we have the increase in world interest rate, so here it becomes important that earlier you were at R1, here you have the output supply curve. Now, because of this increase in the world interest rate, what typically happens is that you have more of the earnings coming from abroad, and this creates. So, if you have the world interest rate moving up, now once you have the world interest rate moving up, you earn more, but since you have the only one market, credit market, and in that you have to participate. So, if the interest rate has gone up on your savings, you may be earning higher rate of interest, but here with regard to your domestic investment it will be lower, and for some other variables also it will be lower, right. So, overall what it feels like that if you have the R2, then this R2 will create increased interest rate will create a favorable scenario, and your earnings are going to be better, but from domestic side your investment may be lower. So, this is also a favorable scenario for the current account surplus. Some of the arguments can be linked here, that here you were at R1, right, but because of the rate of interest increase, now you are becoming more competitive in the international market, and whatever is your savings with regard to the CA, you can lend and make money, and that lending will create an extra output, and then the aggregate demand will also shoot up. Now, here we are having the government expending. So, once we have the government spending, then it matters a lot, that because of the government expenditure. So, if you have government expenditure, it is bound to happen that your output is going to be higher. So, this is what your production capacity is going to be increasing. So, once it increases, then here you have the demand also, because people will have extra amount of income to purchase. So, that will also compensate this. So, if you are having both increase, you will be moving from lower output to higher output, and this will create a favorable scenario. But here again the interest or inflationary scenario may be a challenge. Then here we have an increase in current total productivity. This is also a favorable scenario, as we have seen already in one period model, that if increase in productivity, this creates a favorable scenario. So, this is also leading to what we had here in government spending. The only thing you have to know that here it is the output is less elastic, whereas the demand is more elastic. In this case, we are seeing both the same. So, not much change. So, this is also having the same kind of scenario. If you are having current productivity increasing, it creates better scenario, and your exports and everything will go up, and current account surplus will also go up, and this will create a favorable scenario for the economy. In case of future total productivity, if you are going to have a forward looking scenario, then in forward looking scenario people may not be giving that much preference about the future. So, in that case your current account surplus may not rise, but in most of the cases we have covered, here also current account surplus will rise, here also will rise, here also will rise, and here also it is highly likely, right. In this case the current account surplus may rise or fall, but highly likely that it is going to rise. Here in this case future total productivity is not going to increase, because in most of the cases we have found that with certain expectations about future productivity it may not be good, because then you have the sudden, in the current period itself you have the demand for investment goods a lot, and this will create a when people expect their margin of product of capital is going to be higher, then of course there will be more of demand of that, and that may not be able to meet in future. So that was the reason for the dot-com bubble that we had in the US around 2000. So those are the issues that we the dot-com bubble that we had in the US. So that mentions about. So with this I will be concluding the session. So we have covered the most of the sections that we wanted, and this particular session I hope it has been useful to understand the macro dimensions, and I request all of you to please pay attention to what we discussed here, especially the microeconomic dimensions. So macroeconomic dimensions may have helped you understand that how to draw the 2 period scenarios. So with this I am going to stop here. Thank you so much for your attention.